Hello and welcome to While We're Talking About Rabbits. Rabbits are things that run around on the interwebs and that confuse and distract everybody. But sometimes, actually all the time, rabbits, they have life. And life is always interesting. You just have to slow them down and talk about them. Today, we offer you another episode in the Immersion series on Why Are We Talking About Rabbits. We take a guest and we go into the concept of immersing. What does it mean to give yourself over? Today, Lieutenant Commander Tim Berg, former Navy pilot, flyer of F-14s, a test pilot that flew crazy planes, including one that had a parachute, and currently testing big planes in the sky that you're probably flying in. So today on WAWTAR, the Immersion series, you get to meet Lieutenant Tim Berg. So, Tim, guys, this is Tim Berg. He's on our Immersion series tonight. We are recording, what is it, early November, right, Tim?
Yep, November 3rd.
We're recording in order to delve into the depths of the concept of immersion or getting lost in something. Our work in First Things does that. You kind of leave your culture and enter another. And we kind of think of it as akin to going underwater. And if you hold your breath long enough, like a Navy guy, which you are, then you can actually sort of become at peace for a minute with the underwater. And if you're good at it, you can start to actually see the ecosystem. And then you get wisdom that you didn't think you had. That's the premise of this series you're on. But first, before we introduce you to everybody, Tim, who is a dear friend of mine and also related through marriage, can I offer you a toast?
Yeah, thanks, John. Brother John.
brother Tim, how about this? To blood forged beyond the body. So we're not related, but I feel a kinship with you. So to all of you out there who have a sense of blood, even with people who you don't share an actual kinship, an actual blood relative, to those people in our lives, Gagimardros. To you, the victory. Well, I don't know, Tim. I'll just say there were many years ago before you were in the family. I was like, I don't know if I really like that guy. Because you and I are different. And it had to do with your extreme calm. And here you are all these years later, we're talking about, I think, some of that calm that got put into your work. So tell folks here who not who you are, but tell us about how you came up college and then your early days in the Navy and what you did, and even a little bit about what you do now.
Sure. Thanks, John. So grew up in the Midwest in a suburb of Minneapolis. Our summers were spent with their grandparents in southern Minnesota and also in eastern South Dakota. Really, that was an immersion in a sense that we spent those times with our grandparents a lot. And I have a brother and a sister. And so that's where I am tonight, actually, is on my grandparents' farm.
That's right.
In South Dakota and where my folks live now. And so that was a special time for me growing up. And I remember at about 8 years old, I'd be out in the field plowing with my grandfather. He's on one tractor, I'm on the other, and I'd look up and see all the airplanes going over because this does happen to be in flyover country. And I was thinking, this tractor is pretty neat, but what would it be like to be in the airplane? And I really did think about that.
You have those memories? You can remember that? Yeah.
Yeah. And those were the days where Air Force planes would fly low levels. I remember one time a B-52 almost flew right over my head.
Wow.
That was pretty cool. But And then so after that, got really immersed myself in reading all the airplane books in the library, and decided I'd like to be a pilot. I'll give it a shot anyway. And so I focused on in my schooling, trying to figure out how to be a pilot. I had an uncle who was a Navy pilot.
Even in high school, this was in your head in high school?
Yeah, yeah. And my uncle helped me, teach me about different ways to go be a pilot. In the military, he was a Navy pilot, so he steered me to the Navy, and suggested I fill out a big stack of paperwork to go to the Naval Academy, along with his son, my cousin, and so I didn't even know what the Naval Academy was or what that was about, but it was like if that was a way to fly, I'll fill out the paperwork. So we did all that, and then got accepted for some weird reason, and went there.
Were you one of these guys? Was schooling easy for you?
We went to public schools, and in Minnesota at the time were very good, and so I was always did well in school. Yeah, so,
And that's partly why you got in, but that's not the only reason they take folks into the Naval Academy, right? There must have been something else going on.
It's a little bit of well-roundedness. You got to, play sports. You show that you've done that. Be in different community activities. Maybe have a little work.
Flying was the thing. Flying was the thing.
I'd never really flown at the time, but I wanted to be a pilot. But that's not part of going to a service academy. You have no idea what you're getting into.
Okay.
That was a possibility to be able to be a pilot. So, yeah, gave it a shot. Got accepted, and just turned 18, and checked into the Naval Academy on July 6th, 1981. That dates me. And thought, wow, this is pretty cool. In Annapolis, Maryland, it was unbelievably hot and humid. They give you a bunch of uniforms, and they give you a free haircut and free food, and then they swear you in, and then your immersion happens, and you basically get yelled at for the next 3 months and never stop running.
So let's talk before we get to I like the concept of the sky as the ocean in my analogy. Like the sky is a place that I want to learn about in this talk. Before we get though, the school itself is a deep immersion. Do they try to take you off the grid? Are they trying to reorder you in some ways?
Yeah, that's a big part of military training is basically, you could say it's a way of immersion. Nowadays, that would involve like taking everybody's phones. But what it involved for us is basically intense 12 weeks. Every day's on except for Sunday morning. And that was the only off time. And you learn to do all kinds of things you had never imagined doing. And some of them good and some of them just ridiculous. But that was the whole point. And you had to get good at the ridiculous also. Otherwise, you got the more harassment. So a big part of it was learning how to avoid being the special case. So you learn things like
did some people? I know you, man. I could see you being a little bit irritated with the ridiculous.
Yeah.
Was that hard?
At first, well, yeah, if you let your feelings show through, it is hard because you're like, this is just stupid. This guy with bad breath is yelling at me because I forgot what was the dessert for the evening meal. That was kind of,
it's absurd.
But so the thing was, we learned to memorize a lot of things, like, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all the menu items, and be able to converse in different newspaper articles, be able to remember all the famous naval sayings, all the statues and things around the Naval Academy yard, all the ships, all the airplanes, and including the Soviets. All those kind of things that you had to just is memorizing. And but that was a key thing, right? Is really learn how to be the discipline to be able to do that under pressure. And really, none of it was the point of getting good at memorizing what's, for dinner. But the point was to be able to, focus and then put things in your brain and be able to recall them at a stressful time. And that was the focus of that.
Were you stressed?
you're under very high stress.
You would you comment to yourself in your own mind? Yeah, like I'm stressed.
No, but my approach to it was I felt like this is stressful. Every time we went to meal, we from where we stayed in the dorm to where we would go eat, we went past the section where the people would drop out, and you see
No kidding. No kidding.
we would go by the dropouts, and you're like, oh man, they're just hanging out, and here we are, we're still in it. And I
That's on
figured,
purpose. That's on
yeah, but
purpose.
I figured that, if I couldn't hack it, they would tell me. Um, and so I figured I'd just keep going, right, till they kick me out.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my approach, right? And and that was kind of my approach throughout my time at the Naval Academy for sure. Is I'll just do my best, and if that's not good enough, then that's all I could do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So there must be a moment then when those first couple months turn into something like normality. And it's
yeah, you get good at it, and you kind of conquer that the silly parts of it, and maybe you learn some neat things like we learned how to sail. You learn actually have some more intellectual discourse about things. So there is a point to the deep immersion, right? And the crazy all the crazy stuff you had to do, like working out at dawn and all those things. By the end of the summer, you're in incredible shape. You've learned a lot. A lot of it you learned didn't even know existed, and you're pretty confident, to go to the next level.
Was there a moment when you said, I belong, or like I can breathe down here in this immersion? Like I get it now?
I think so. Yeah, toward the end of the summer, that your parents come out, and
Oh, is that right?
that weekend. So my family came out, and that's
You were
pretty
still
special.
standing. You were still
Yeah.
standing.
Yeah, and they see you with your buzz cut, and that was neat, though. You're like, hey, I did this. I can do
So
this.
when did then, right? You don't have to be a flyer because you're entering the Naval Academy. But when you get in there must be some point where it gets delineated and you're like, I could do that. When did that happen?
Yeah, so then you start learning about, well, okay, now I'm here, and now what happens? So how it works in a service academy is there's different career options that officers can do in the military. For the Navy, the general categories were be a surface warfare officer, like drive a ship, be a submariner, submarines or nuclear power, Marine Corps, or aviation, naval aviation. So, and then the number one person in the class gets their first pick, and the last person in the class gets whatever's left. So there's a little motivation.
Wow. And number one here being, is it grade point?
Yeah, it's grade point average, but also there was a military bearing score, where basically different people would rank you. So it's kind of an overall performance score, a numerical number that they use to rank every graduate.
Wow. So everybody wants to know who's listening. Do you remember your number?
Yeah, I actually do, because you can't really forget it.
No, how could you? Yeah, exactly.
So we started with like 1,240 people. We graduated about 10,000 or 1,040. So we lost about 200 classmates, and I graduated at 135.
135. So
which
top
is
10,
pretty good.
top 10%. Yeah, man.
Pretty good for me, because I wasn't, I was an engineer and not an all-star performer. A lot of my classmates, I learned afterwards, after I got there, had been to prep school or even a year or two of college.
Sure, right.
So, kind of starting out on I didn't know what I was getting into, but it did okay.
But it it gave you access out of that world and into the flyer world. What do you guys call what would they call that entrance?
Naval aviation. So when I went,
what was a nickname for you guys?
Yeah. When we went to service selection night, where I was number 135. So I went right in after 134. You would go into this room, you see what's left on the board, and you pick it. And there was
Oh,
all
it's
kinds
like that.
of
It's like a draft. Okay.
yeah. And different people would try to draft you. Like the Marines wanted to draft me, the submariners wanted to draft me, but I always wanted to be a pilot. So I
So
picked.
at this point, we're getting into flying because this, it's something weird. Most of us do it, have done it, but not like you have. What's the specter of war in your young mind? I'm sure it's school and there's life and there's cafeteria life and there's wondering about dating, but like also, I wasn't going to kill anybody. Did that come up? How did people handle the idea that, yeah, at the end of this, somehow I'm probably going to have to be in harm's way? Did that come up a lot or not really?
Yeah. Well, you learn, it does come up later. And when you learn, like in naval history classes, about, how the Navy and Marine Corps have been used throughout history to, provide national security. You learn about from an officer perspective, a different way of thinking about how military should be used or not used. So it's not like people in the military generally don't get excited about going to war. It's all about avoiding being in a war. And at the time, the leadership there at the Naval Academy, like the superintendent and quite a few of the high-ranking officers, had been naval aviators and Vietnamese prisoners of war.
Okay, that
So
makes sense. Yeah.
very, very wise, experienced men, and people to definitely look up to. And 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 one of the neat things that I appreciated during my time there was they would bring those kind of people in, like really famous people, and give talks. And here you are listening to, some really renowned people, like different senators, or even I remember one time Ross Perot came, just all kinds of different people. You get,
Sure.
Admiral Stockdale.
So war as ominous, that's not the way it was really presented. It was more of an idea of a task. At one point, I might have to do that, but
Yeah, a mission. And officers in the military are leading, doing the basically the managers, right, of
I see.
the organization. So it's a lot about leadership, and learning to be a good leader. You have to know yourself and know your
Right.
goods and blues.
Right. That's the old. Well, that's that's that. We talk about old world, new world on here a lot. That's that wedge piece right between what I think of as sort of the German model starting in the 19th and 20th centuries, where education was about utility. Like the point of getting education was to become good at something. And then in the old world, the point of education, really a monastic idea, was to become good, not necessarily become good at something that happened, but to become good. So there was one was moral fashioning and the other one was sort of utility and the fashioning of a useful product. I feel like you guys were trying to do both on some level. Would you agree or not really?
Yeah, yeah. They're immersed in the Naval Academy. The service academies are really immersive experiences, both physically, cognitively, and then the like the immersion, like literally like jumping in the pool kind of stuff. We
Yeah.
did some really difficult stuff in the pool we had to do. So yeah, you were all in. You couldn't like do a mediocre job and make it through. If there was some people really focused on, like, if the minimum wasn't good enough, it wouldn't be the minimum. But I was never sure about that, so I just always did my best.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you get into a plane at some point. When do you get into a plane while you're still at the Naval Academy? You must.
Yeah, they give you a chance before you go to flight school, like in your senior year, to do a little flying, and just a little Piper Cherokees were what we had at a nearby airport. And I think that was just so you kind of had a little bit of an inkling of what it was going to be like, and learn some of the issues. And then some people, it is an experience that they really don't like, and
Yeah.
you
I'm one
kind
of
of
them.
find out about it once you do it. where you can get violently airsick or you get disoriented or you just have nothing, you don't like any of it. And so that's good to find out before you
That
go.
didn't happen to you?
No, no, I kind of liked it actually. And what I liked about it is I was always kind of been a studier of maps. Like what do things look like and where can you
Mm,
go and how do you get there? When you're in an airplane, you've got the best like satellite view map
yeah.
there is right on a clear day, and you see how it really looks. And I've just always loved that.
That's interesting. There's something about the telos, the ability to see further down the road or something.
Yeah, yeah. So the pilots in the front of the airplane, have a great field of view and can really see the earth and everything going on down there, and the water and the land and the mountains, and it's just beautiful.
So
And the
that's
people, when your people are in the back and they got their sunshades down and they don't even look out, it drives me nuts. But
is that right?
they're
So let's talk about flying. So at some point, guys, he's gonna get into some cool planes, some crazy planes. Um, how did just take us one more step? How did you get from the graduating the young man in the Naval Academy into these cool planes? What's the big professional moment? Is it flight school?
Yeah, so Navy Flight School is about 2 years long. You go for primary training is on Pensacola, Florida, and that's an academic, and then there's physical stuff like obstacle courses and boxing and swimming, and then flying airplanes.
Did you say
And
boxing?
yeah, so the physical part, they would there was you'd do boxing and wrestling and obstacle courses and running and swimming, a lot of swimming, and a lot of it was to see if you could hack it.
Mhm.
Like I would say the swimming parts, they was actually hard, right? Where like swim a mile in your flight suit,
Oof.
um,
Was
simulate
that
jumping
tough?
off.
Was that one of the
Yeah,
toughest?
actually, I'm not a good swimmer, but that is an endurance thing. It took me about an hour, like swimming in your overalls, but it's
Right,
hard.
right.
Treading water for 10 minutes with all of your flight gear on, which is really heavy in your boots. And my neutral point is basically at the bottom of the pool. And when you add all that stuff, I felt like, I would belong below the bottom of the pool. So I had to work really hard at that stuff.
And you knew it.
um,
You knew that was a weakness.
yeah, but I was determined not to quit, right?
Yeah,
I knew if
yeah.
I was going to drown, they'd probably pull me out. So I would just like never let myself go near the side of the pool, right? You think like, oh, this is getting hard. I should quit. Well, you probably should quit, but if you get close to the pool, then you'll grab for it to
And
the
if you
edge.
just sink, at least you maintained the effort. They have
Yeah,
to fix that. Wow, man. But most people click off by that point. They go to
right.
the edge, right?
But that's how when you're determined. That was when you had to be determined to make it through, right? Where it wasn't fun, but for me, but I wanted to get to the goal of being a Navy pilot, right?
And
And
what
that
was
was
the
just step
what
one.
what was the plane that you guys were angling to fly? Like the cool plane at what is that
Yeah.
in the late 80s? What's the cool plane?
So the movie Top Gun was coming out right as I finished flight school.
Oh
Remember?
no, is that real? Is that true? Oh, you guys must have. These things are real, especially for young men. That must have influenced people.
When it came out, I was in Beeville, Texas, in jet training, and our squadron rented the movie theater in Beeville, Texas, for for basically like a pregame get together and then watch the movie on a Saturday.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that was pretty epic, right? Because that was what our lives were going to be like in about
Right,
3.
right. There's so, but that I could see where your instructors might be like, "Oh God, don't let them watch this." How did it match up? The new one came out, and everyone they had the audacity to say the greatest movie ever made. Like, no offense to movie
Yeah,
makers, and I
it probably
like,
wasn't a great movie, but that there's it's a movie. Um, it's kind of jazzes you up though when you see planes flying off carriers, and I did that for 2.5 years in my time in the Navy, it's intense, right? There's no more intense aviation experience as far as just operating aircraft as aircraft carrier aviation in the United States Navy, because we could go anywhere, we could fly anytime, and we were a powerful force for good. Is that the commercial?
I've seen the
I mean,
commercial.
it was intense, right? And so same thing out of flight school, you pick what you want to go do. And I think I put F-14s, they were on my list, but anyway, that's what they sent me to go do is F-14s in San Diego.
And is that the same plane that they were flying in that movie?
Yeah. Now I was, and my call sign was Ice, but it was before the movie. I got the call sign Ice from when I played hockey.
Wait a minute. Your
Iceberg.
call sign was Ice because you're Berg, Iceberg.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys, listen to that. That's nuts. All right, we got to get, this is our next conversation. I'm going to take a break. We're going to talk to Molly. This is our segment, Tim, 2 minutes with Molly. We call her our super supporter. She's going to come on and talk to us, and we'll be right back after that.
I don't know. I just think you need to change your look. I think that if something's, if you know, the metrics aren't changing, I think it's you. I think it's really, you need to look at your appearance.
Like my face.
Mainly your head, like this stuff up here. So here are my ideas.
For what I should put on my head.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a strategy. Okay.
These are strategies.
Ready.
Okay. First one, wig. You choose the wig. Maybe. Second idea. How do you feel about neck tattoos? I know that neck isn't the same as head, but like, because then you could do like some advertisements.
Like right on my neck?
Yeah.
With what? Like an actual tattoo?
Yeah, that's what a neck tattoo is. It's a tattoo on your neck.
So
like if I said like a Sharpie, do you want to have a Sharpie? Like First Things Foundation. You know.
And I go to the like grocery store and then someone asks me and that's
right.
That's the building that way.
Or like FTF, like right here.
Like a teardrop FTF. Like I killed someone for FTF.
But you like saved a life. It like kind of turns it on its head. Like
an upside down teardrop?
Sure.
How do you know about prison tats, by the way? Makes me
we're not going to talk about it. But anyway, so my third idea is, do you go bowling? Like ever?
No.
No, okay. Well, I was going to say that if you like frequented a bowling alley, what you could do is you could like maybe shave your head like a little bit more often and then go ask if you could like shine your head. Because I think that could be your third option, is like having like a more like shining, regal, like melon.
Like a better bald head?
Yeah, like you need to commit.
So, your Ice, the movie just came out, and these planes are powerful. How fast will you go in this immersive situation? How fast could you go?
Like, well, the F-14, you can fly supersonic. But that's not the point of the airplane, but it is a very fast airplane. It's one of the faster, well, it's still was the fastest Navy airplane. Yeah, I could go 1.7 Mach.
What was the point? What would you say the strategic point of the plane was?
The strategic point of the F-14 was actually shoot down Soviet bombers that would come out and try to destroy the Navy ships.
Okay.
So we had the airplane was actually designed in the 60s around a real powerful radar and a missile that could shoot down the Soviet bombers before they shot their missiles to sink our ships. Kind of one of those.
And would you have to study the Soviet fleet and the Soviet bombers and learn what their capabilities are?
Yeah, we've memorized those.
Do you remember what plane you were trying to shoot down?
Yeah, you'd have to be able to recognize it in a second, just visually, but also know it's what it could do, what weapons it could carry, what was its armaments, its protections, and so you could recognize it. If you were cleared to fire on a particular type of airplane, you had to be able to identify it real quickly.
How did you incrementally get from a Cessna to an F-14? Or is there a pattern that you go through?
We incrementally, you start with propeller airplanes and learn all the basics of flying, instrument flying, formation flying, aerobatics, be able to do takeoffs, approaches, and landings are really good and important in the Navy. And then you move on to the next plane, which was a jet, a T-2 Buckeye, and do the same thing again, but then also throw in carrier landings and also shoot weapons. And the carrier landings, that was a really probably unique thing about learning to be a Navy jet pilot was we would practice carrier landings a lot. Like you'd go out, you basically do carrier landings for like 2 months of your life.
Wow.
It was a whole immersion in itself. You'd fly maybe twice a day, flying 10 to 12 landings at a time. And each landing would get graded and you'd be mostly solo. And your instructor would be on the ground grading every landing, and you'd be landing in a simulated aircraft carrier box on a runway.
Wow. But it wasn't a simulated aircraft carrier. It was an actual aircraft carrier.
Yeah, you get to the aircraft carriers, but they have the size of an aircraft carrier painted on the runway, and you'd fly.
I see.
Flying into an aircraft carrier into that little paint box, which the paint box on the runway looked incredibly small.
And you had what was the most dangerous part about trying? Was it the approach? Was it trying to hit the brakes? What was the most dangerous, or what was the part in the immersion that made you at least the most worried as a pilot?
Yeah. So when you do go out to the aircraft carrier, you're all by yourself. So that's one thing that's interesting, because here you are in your plane by yourself, flying in formation, and you zip by the ship in formation, and then you brake and turn downwind, put your gear down, flaps down, and then you see the ship and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do it. And then you fly your pattern and you fly really precisely, airspeed, altitude, and angle of attack, and then you pick up the lineup and the glide path of the ship. The thing about landing on the ship is your back end of your airplane goes over the back end of the ship, like maybe by like 12 feet. And so if you get a little bit low, like say you got 12 feet low, part of your airplane is going to hit the back of the ship.
Yeah.
Which is very bad. So
like dead bad.
The deviations are the tolerance is tight, and if you're not going straight, if you were going too far right or left, you'd run off the ship or hit another airplane.
Yeah.
So,
and the ship is moving, of course.
Yeah, ship's moving. The runway part is angled 10 degrees to the left. So there's everything's moving, and the ship's moving in the water's moving, the ship's pitching, rolling, and Dutch rolling, and up and heaving. So that is the most intense thing about being a Navy pilot, is landing on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. And you remember your first solo?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you don't quite forget it.
No, I can't imagine.
So, and I would say about immersion ship, I was thinking about a story is like when you're learning how to do an immersion type of experience, and that was immersion basically, because that's, like I said, all we did for like 2 months, practice that. Mm-hmm. You start out learning things very procedurally, okay, like do this, and this, and you build up, right? And you're doing things because they told you to, and then over time you actually kind of absorb those, right? And now you understand not just procedures, but you understand why, and why I need to do those things. And for all of us, it takes sometimes longer, sometimes years, right? Or months, maybe, hopefully not years, if you're in that business, to absorb what that is. But the faster you get there, right, to have a greater knowledge of why those procedures exist.
So the knowledge is coming. The knowledge is coming through or after the obedience.
Right.
You trust that you will learn the thing by obeying something like an elder or a process.
Right. Yeah. So I'd say at the beginning of that immersion type of experiences that I had, the guardrails and the procedures were very important, right? So there was guardrails in the system to keep you in a safe area, right?
Yeah.
Like there was somebody watching out for you. The procedures were there for you to learn. But really, the point of all of that was to learn how to master the task, and it's mastery of procedures and understanding where your boundaries are, and how to not just get by and be safe, but be good at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. In the field, one thing we do is we place people, in super upside down cultural situations. They don't understand the language. They don't understand the food. They don't understand the disease that they're getting. And all we immediately place them in what we call their immersion ship, or it's a job, and it's a ridiculous job. It's like going to chop wood, going to pull wheat. You're going to do what those guys do, and you're not going to not do it because they're going to say, don't do that. But we say, no, show up same time every day and do it. And it's got nothing to do with a poverty project. It has everything to do with obeying long enough to be able to see the culture. And then once you're aware of the culture, you can master your way in it. But you have to do the little task over and over and over again. And guys don't like to do that. They want to go on a long hike and see the mountain, and they want to take a trip to the border. They want to meet their wife or meet their husband. But if they stay real tight early, am I right to say all the opportunities for mastering something occur? Too broad,
Right.
Too early, you burn out.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was exactly it. I would take that analogy through all my time flying in the Navy. Which leads you to learn a little bit. The next thing is the next faster, bigger airplane. And that's even more critical to have that mastery of how to immerse yourself in a new airplane. It's even harder to fly, that has more capability. And then when you get to the F-14, it was even more so. And now that airplane is actually very hard to fly around the ship. And it was very expensive. And
yes, it is.
They didn't want you just ejecting out of them. They didn't want you crashing.
They don't. See, this is why I love this guy, guys. He's like, they don't want you ejecting out of them because the plane goes down, right? That's what happened.
Right. So we would not only fly them a lot, but we would one of the things I would do is after work is go over to the simulator and just put that thing on a simulator, like on a 3-mile final to the aircraft carrier, and just hit go, boink, and just fly it, and then see how my landing turned out. And then it was like, oh, that wasn't very good. Wink, do it again. Do it for an hour.
Yeah, this is
right,
Malcolm.
and then do it at night.
Mm-hmm.
Do it at night, and then you do it at night. Now, if you're not good at doing it in daytime, you're going to die at night, right? It's like not even an option. I mean, it's so much harder. So I would say that immersion ship that you were describing is very much like that, right? You start out simple and you have guardrails and you have procedures, but you got to immerse yourself in those and you got to master them. The only way you master those things is by doing them until you actually master them.
Yeah. That's right.
And you got to build the foundation.
Did you take that then? Tell us about your service. So we won't fast forward, but kind of, you get good at it, right? You're a top pilot flying an F-14 around in the early 90s. Is that when you're flying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a little war there in the early 90s.
Yeah. So in August 2nd, 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And I was on the USS Independence, and we were in the Indian Ocean. And literally, we were getting ready to go to Diego Garcia, which is an island in the middle of the ocean, and we're going to hang out at the beach for a week.
Oops.
And then Saddam Hussein screwed it, and we're going to go to Australia. We just had it all planned out. Our summer was awesome.
You had a good summer going, Tim.
Yeah, you know what happened? He did that, and we spent we spent the next 111 days at sea. We went up to the North Arabian Sea and then the Persian Gulf, and we just flew continuously for weeks and months on end we were the first ship there, and we were ready to fight them. And we were flying real weapons, live weapons. If they came out to mess with anybody, we were the defense.
That was you were the scramble jets for that.
Yeah. And then it turned out so that was part of what we call Desert Storm. No, Desert Shield. And we planned, the Iraqis pretty much didn't come out and mess with us. So we were just there all fall, and we got relieved on November 11th, and we came back worked our way to the United States.
So you never actually engaged the enemy during that period, but came close.
Yeah. So that was my part in that. And then so we watched the Gulf War, on CNN when we got back.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're now a fighter jet pilot. You've got this life in the Navy. And you end up, because we could talk all night, but you end up becoming a test pilot. Are you out of the Navy at that point? I don't remember how that went. Because you meet my sister around this time.
Yeah. My commanding officer was a test pilot, and he said, "Hey, Tim, you should apply to this test pilot school." And I didn't really know much about it, but I knew that astronauts, they were all test pilots.
Yeah.
And they were engineers. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I applied. And then I got picked up for it. And it was the most amazing thing. And it changed my life. He said, it will change your life. And it did in so many ways, where I got to go to graduate school up in Monterey for a year and a half. And then after that, during that time, I met your sister.
That's right.
And she became my wife. Just one.
You had a cool, guys, he had one of those weddings with swords.
Yeah. And
everybody had swords. And I showed up like in a green outfit coming back from Africa. It's very confusing. Well, no, that was a different wedding, but I did show up sort of off the boat, and then all these Army guys, our Navy guys were around. And I remember thinking, can I like this guy? It wasn't about you, it was about me, because I had my ideas, but I've learned to love you. It's very interesting that your life in the Navy was suitable to my lovely sister. We didn't have any of that background. Could she embrace this? That's an immersive experience in and of itself, being a Navy wife. How'd she do with that? Or how do people do with that?
Your dad was in the Navy, but I know he got out before you met your mom.
Oh yeah. You're right. He was backline guy. He was cooking stuff. Yeah. You're right about that.
Yeah. No, Elizabeth didn't know anything really about the Navy. In fact, graduate school was really cool. We only wore uniforms once a month for one day. Basically, we just wore civilian clothes and were like normal people. I wasn't in charge of any sailors or anything except myself. We took 4 or 5 classes, and so had weekends off. It was pretty fun.
I see. So you were sort of incognito. You didn't have to play the heavy Navy card. No. So we met on a blind date set up by an Army friend from West Point, and then that was kind of the beginning of our life together, and it's been wonderful. Yeah.
But on the good side,
how did she deal with? Let me ask this, then you can jump in. But how did she deal with test piloting? Because here's my understanding: the test pilot is testing the plane, which implies that it might not do what it's supposed to do. Am I right in my description of test piloting? Yeah,
that's what test pilots do. And then I think it worked well because she didn't know anything about it.
She was just like, enjoy the skies.
Well, and being at the test pilot school is a pretty immersive experience. So we got married in July, like halfway through my time in Maryland at test pilot school, and then came right back. And then after the wedding, we came back on the 4th of July, and class started back up on the 5th, and here we were. I'm going to school, and we're starting our married life together, and it was wonderful, but it was like, we had 35 classmates, and they had many of them were married with their spouses, so we instantly had we had a new family there.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
That was a big part of the immersion ship, and it was like, welcome to the Navy, and here's how we go. And it was busy, it was fun.
Good memories?
Yeah, it was great memories.
Any special memories about the act of flying new planes? Is there something different? Is there something integral about that you say like, wow, that was a whole different experience?
That there is. It's like it is an immersion ship in itself. Like test pilot school think of it as like one half your day is academics, one half is flying, and another half is report writing. And like you've run out of halves, right? So it's intense. You're always behind. But so you learn you have to have built up through your other ability to fly and do academics and report writing. You have to have some of those skills already. And so during that time, during a 1 year time, we flew about 36 different airplanes and helicopters. And so all kinds of different kind of airplanes in different situations. Some in the military and some were like civilian airplanes that we bring in. But you had to have that basic airmanship and understanding of what you were doing, right?
It feels
and not
very
only
design oriented. You had to really understand the design of the plane.
Right. That was the neat thing about being a test pilot is you bring the engineering of how the airplanes work and why they do what they do and how they do it to your ability to fly them. And then in their flight testing, basic flight testing, we would go it's kind of like physics lab. You go figure out like what's the cruise performance of this airplane, and you would be able to go measure that or write down a bunch of data and then do the analysis and write a report on how far it would fly. And it was always interesting to see how your test, matches up with reality.
Well, what happened when they didn't match up? There must have been times. That's the whole point of the test pilot. Like that's not doing what it's supposed to do.
That was when science was actually felt like science, where like you had graph paper, remember that? And then you draw your circles, where your data points are, and then you try to fit them to this curve. And you could tell when you didn't do a good job because it didn't look good.
No way. Really?
Yeah, your data would look good. So then you'd be like, ooh, yeah, that wasn't very good. So you learn by doing, and you learn how you didn't have somebody telling you like you did a crappy job of doing that test. You could see it yourself, right?
Could you feel it in the plane the next day or whatever, whenever you were testing the math, so to speak? Could you feel it in the plane?
Well, you had to get good at being a test pilot is a lot different than being a pilot. Like just being a pilot is generally operating an airplane to do a mission from one place to another, in general. Being a test pilot is designed to measure things or how things work. And so you'd have to learn how to fly very precisely, like fly for an extended amount of time, not just within like 5 knots of your target, like fly within a half a knot and fly within like 50 feet and a tenth of a G and just like always very precise. You had to learn to be very precise and very disciplined in your procedures. And you basically add on all this engineering, and we'd even fly with all this measurement equipment and voice recorders. And so you had to be, I think of it as maybe this is an immersion ship thing, which I talk to people about being a test pilot, is you have to imagine like a little observer sitting on your shoulder and observing what you're doing. So like, your brain's busy doing your thing, but you have to imagine there's an observer here and you have to be connected to that observer. And that observer have to observe what you are doing to do the task.
Got it.
Right. And I think like a detached observer, like I think that's important when you're immersed, is also like have a connection with some kind of a detached observation of what's going on.
Wow. That's
a big part of situational awareness when you're a test pilot.
The detached observer in a plane. Now, you're not going to ever get into a plane that you don't think is going to fly. It's going to fly on some level, but you must be pushing some aspect of the design. That's the point, right?
Right.
And then this detached observer concept is something like being still enough and aware enough of yourself that you can properly push it without getting, I don't know, passionate or scared. Is there a God concept in this? Did it help you to know something like God, or did it strengthen faith in a eternal, or did it not matter? Was it irrelevant?
To me, my faith was always very important. I was never really, I think being a test pilot, when you're going through that, you're also younger. So you're kind of you're not aware of your mortality quite as much, but I was never really worried about that anyway. The observer part was to recognize like when something, well, a few things, like when you were transgressing a boundary that you shouldn't have, right? Like to do good flight tests, you have limits. You have a lot more limits. So in addition to just the airplane, you have test limits, and so you have to be aware of those. And sometimes they're really complicated. So that's the observer's helpful with that. Also, you have your own limits when you just realize like I'm not paying it. I can't keep track of everything going on anymore. I mean, maybe all of a sudden you're whatever it is, right? Your brain's not keeping up, or you're all of a sudden, something doesn't feel right, or your muscles, you're moving these controls around in weird ways, or there was a weird noise and you're not sure what that was, or all those kind of things. The observer helps you go, okay, slow it down. Let's maybe it's good to take a pause here, right? And
what is it? The observer, like when someone says, I think to myself, philosophically, especially in European tradition, in the New World tradition, it's not really possible. That second person within you is something like a recalling of God or consciousness, or it's some second thing. I keep hearing it in your description of the observer. Can you bolster the observer? Is it something that you're trained to gain the silence or the stillness?
I think one of the things I've learned to be a good engineering test pilot is help the observer be able to describe what's going on from a detached perspective, and like what compensation I am doing to do a task, right? Like when we're tuning how airplanes fly, stability and control or flight control testing, you would say, look at all those different control inputs and the way they're timed and shaped and sized, and the performance of the airplane. There's something good or there's something bad, or are we doing well enough? Is our performance good enough? Well, like, because when you're in the doing of the task, I mean, I'm really trying to do the task, but this observer is like observing like all the things that I'm doing, right? And trying to make sense of it. And then being able to kind of reconnect with that observer after the flight or after the test event and describe what they saw.
Wow.
The observer described what he saw, right? What he saw me doing.
But it's you on that level that's doing that.
Yeah.
Again, that feels incredibly like an ascetic. It makes sense that it would be ascetic in the sense that it's a stripped down, deep, profound patience, or an attention and an intention that is not let go of. Like, look, I'm not that ascetic. I can be easily distracted, but there are moments when my intuition about something is so focused. I don't know that you could get me out of it, especially writing and preparing a speech or something. Like I get lost in that. I don't know if I would know how to train it, but maybe that's a type of prayer. It feels like it's all the things that went into your naval training that led you to be a test pilot on some level, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were acquiring this ability.
A detached viewpoint of where you are, what you're doing, how to respond to things is useful for all of us. And anyway, my analogy of that little man on my shoulder is one way to think about it.
That's
obviously
cool.
it's all going on in your brain, but you can really get sucked into the here and now, the present, and without really observing where you are in the big picture.
Yeah. What was your most, I know you flew a plane, that had a parachute. And I know that no matter what you told me in your calm, nice Midwestern voice, there's no way that the first time you had to open the parachute on that thing that wasn't scary. There's got to be something going. Like, that seems not normal. Tell us about that plane.
Yeah. So if I never deployed a parachute while I was flying the plane. So there was frequently times where I've flown planes where I was in an ejection seat or I was wearing a parachute, right? But I've never jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. I think that's about it.
But wasn't there a plane that had a parachute? Like you could parachute the plane. Wasn't that your plane?
Yeah, Cirrus aircraft. Now their airplanes have parachutes. So yeah, I flew those for a few years, and that was part of it.
I see you I feel like a cartoon, like you're pulling a lever and you're like, pull, and then how does the plane go from going that way really fast to a parachute? I don't understand. Please tell us. Somebody else does not understand too.
Yeah, well, one of the founders of that company actually got in a mid-air collision in Wisconsin. No. And he survived it, obviously, but the other plane, the people in that did not survive it. So he started this company, his thing that he wanted to do is make it safe, so like more approachable for the average person who wanted to be a pilot and more in personal transportation mode. And so his idea was you should be able to survive things that happen. So developed a airplane parachute, a whole airplane parachute. So if something bad happened to the airplane or the pilot, the procedure could be slow down, shut your engine off, and pull the parachute. And the parachute just let your airplane, fall to the ground at a safe sink rate, and you'd survive. And of all the airplanes that they've made so far, they've saved it's over 140 lives, I think.
You're kidding.
No, so pretty amazing.
Is the key to the engineering there to slow down enough to open the parachute?
Yeah, and that would fit into my observer story. The people that have not survived the opening the parachute, where they got themselves into situations where they were flying too fast or too low, and then they realized too late that they were in an unrecoverable situation, and then they pulled the parachute, and then it doesn't have a chance to work, right? You pull it if you're going too fast and it's just blown to shreds. You deploy it, you're too low, it doesn't come open, you hit the ground too hard.
Were you in the plane the first time it deployed were you that tester of that parachute that day?
No, I never was in the airplane when they deployed the parachute.
I see. But someone was the first one to do that, right?
Yeah.
Just do one more fun thing for us, because it's fun for us. For you, it's probably like party tricks or something. What was the most, and I'm sure my sister would love to hear this, what is the most dangerous time in all of these planes? I mean, now you develop planes for a major company, and you're their design and test pilot for all kinds of stuff. Has there been a moment where you're like, yikes, that was a little iffy? And you don't have to say the company or whatever, but.
No, yeah. I bring it back maybe to an experience back in my Navy flight test pilot days, where I did testing on the F-14 after I graduated from test pilot school. But then I went back to test pilot school as an instructor, and I learned a lot of things there as an instructor. First of all, as an instructor, I actually learned all those things I was supposed to learn when I was a student, because now I have to teach them. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big lesson for me. For sure. Is really that's that level of getting, like I was talking about the guardrails and the immersion. Yeah, we were immersed as students in learning how to be a test pilot, but you really learned to do it when you were instructing, right? And then you got to fly with a lot of students, and you got to see all the mistakes that all the people learning could make, and then you learn to fly airplanes that didn't really feel that comfortable in, right? Like tail draggers, I get checked out. I flew tail draggers as an instructor, and they were just a little higher workload and hard for me to keep on the runway. So and high winds, but I basically learned how to master that, and then it became a very fun airplane. Spin testing, I would never like spins. In fact, in flight school, when we do spins, I'd usually get airsick because you're spinning around, and it's just very disorienting and didn't feel good.
Was
So I
that
learned
in the test? What do you call it, in the test cockpit, or was that in a plane you would spin?
in an airplane,
It's up in the air.
Yeah. So then I became well, they wanted me to instruct in that. So then I learned how to be a flight test. I would instruct people on how to do out of control flight testing. And so we would go up and stall the airplane and spin it every different way you could, and including upside down, and including like inertial coupled departures where it kind of somersaults across the sky. And the first few times you do that is just so absolutely disorienting. You just really don't know which way is up or down or what's going on. But then after a while, then you get to be an instructor, and then you do it so often that it actually starts to be fun in a different way, right?
Did it though? You're
Yeah.
flipping the plane around in the air and spinning it.
But kind of, I think it's like your analogy about the field workers, and going to different places. You've seen there's like there's a thing, right? There's a level of immersion and mastery of different things, and that stays pretty consistent.
We talk about it. So we call it, it's usually the last 4 months to 5 months of a 2.5 year, 2 year, 2.5 year stay, where we kind of call it being in the jam. Like, you now get everything. You get why the women sell the meat the way they do, why it has the look it has. You understand when not to eat it. I'm talking about West Africa, but it's the same in Guatemala. You start to understand everything, and the things you couldn't see before you see, and the little language tricks. And there's almost nothing that scares you. And then the new guy comes and they're just scared of everything. But they're not scaredy people. They just haven't seen yet, right? I guess that's what you're talking about. You flip it enough times and spin it, eventually it starts to all make sense.
Yeah.
But you're in the air. You're really actually in a different environment. I mean, we're in a different environment culturally, but there's still like human physics. The air seems different, but I guess you can.
Yeah, it's different because it's very immersive, right? Because you're not only in the airplane, you're in all this flight gear, and it's a very stressful accelerations and disorient visually and very spatially disorienting. But once you're able to stay oriented with all of that going on, it's really that's when the fun starts.
Yeah,
right. And that's when the little guy on my shoulder is watching the student get really messed up and confused, and then having to think about, wait a minute, he's not going to recover the airplane, right? Wow. Like, we keep spinning and we're spinning and now we're getting too low. What can I talk him out of it? So you try talking like, hey, look at this, do this, push this rudder, push the stick over here, like helping, nudge them. And then you realize, like, they're not doing it, they're not getting it, or they did it wrong, so now you have to realize, okay, we're going to survive today, so I'm going to take over the airplane and recover the airplane.
Wow.
Right. So you have to
and you've seen that, you've done that.
Oh yeah. So I'd say, and those are it all happens in seconds, right? When you're flying like 300 miles an hour toward the ground, you go through a lot of feet pretty quick.
And you go through a quick decision making.
Yeah.
Well, you go through decision making very quickly.
Right. Right.
And
so I think,
on behalf of someone else. Wow.
Yeah. So I think like field worker immersion, I think about like those times where people have gotten like threatened by disease or circumstances or whatever. You kind of gotta realize, like, hey, what to do, right? Something's not right, how to handle it.
It's very similar. I think there's a spiritual dimension to it all that's also very similar. I always say on the show, there's a spiritual physics. There are rules to the unseen. There are rules to how to properly love. Nobody wants to hear that. And I'm not talking about gay marriage. There's all kinds of loves, but what I'm trying to say is there are physics even to the spiritual things. You don't get to choose even in that realm. You have to obey on some level, which is a fascinating idea because it allows for things like priests and elders and gurus and people who have insight. You start to realize they have insight on the rules. And then you go, whoa. Like, I would want to be in your plane because you have insights on the rules. And it feels like it applies to the spiritual world. And that people don't think that is I think it's a sign of it's sadness. It's like a modern ignorance that you can't see that the same concepts apply. And that's weird. That's an atheistic society at that point, I think. But now I'm riffing, Tim. You can stop me.
Deep thoughts. Deep things.
You got them. But you got me to think about it. So in the end, here you are now. We're getting older. What would you encourage in terms of immersion for, say, young people like your son and my godson, or really anybody who's trying to figure out life at 14 and 15? What are the rules that you could apply? And then we'll check out, because this was excellent. Yeah. I enjoyed myself.
I was thinking about that. When you think about what the immersion experiences may be in one's life, or my life, your life, they're like things that you decided to do. Like for you, going to Africa, for me, joining the Navy, you kind of like, it was a thing you did, but you didn't know where it was going, how it was going to turn out, what you would learn, but you're all in. You're all in until they kick you out, or you can't make, till they take you out in the stretcher or put you in the ground, you're all in, right?
That is so true.
And you're going to learn from that. As long as you're doing things that have, like, I'm not talking about negative behaviors, right? Like, get all in on a bad group of people or bad behavior. No, I'm talking about experiences.
Yeah.
Or things you're doing to help others or learn. Same thing, like if you're going to school, like to learn something, well, you should probably go all in, right? Like, who wants to be like devote a lot of time and money and resources to be mediocre?
That's right.
Like, it's just not worth it, right? And same in then in life, we've been fortunate, right, to meet our wives, right, and start families. And I think you got to go all in. And same in your faith life.
You're right. So here's what where I want to say to you is, it's actually the nature of marriage. That's the point. It's not about love. It's about all in. And then when somebody is all in with you, wow, it's like synergy, right? It's just like in a Navy, I'm sure in a battle situation. When someone's all in with you, it increases your power to do all the things you couldn't do. And that's it. Yeah. And that's why marriage, in the new world, the marriage it's not as understandable. I'm not saying people are bad or good. They cannot understand that I would go all in with someone I don't know yet or well enough. It's like, I'm not really going to fly that test plane because I don't get it well enough. I'm not going up there yet. Well, no, you have to go up in order for you to actually understand. You have to get married in order for you to love. And you're like, no, I want to love before. And like, it won't work that way. Yeah, that's right. I like that. Yeah. And I being a teacher to young people, in fact, I'll do a pitch. And then I'm teaching a course called The History of Love as an offering to our supporters. And people who support in a recurring way, they can join online, or we're doing it in the restaurant now, Tim. And the class, it's really a wine club for folks in town. in Greenville, South Carolina. They come and have wine. We try new Georgian wines. And I start a conversation, a class on the history of love. What is love? And then we look at the Vedic tradition in India. We look at the Muslim tradition, Orthodox Christianity, and we talk about all these ideas. And I taught this previously at a high school and at a college. And the course, you quickly understand, this is where I'm going at, you quickly understand in 2 seconds that before the hyper-individualism of the modern age, everyone knew what you were saying to be true. Now, that doesn't make them wiser or better, but they knew that you're not going to be able to love somebody until you marry them. So you can't front load the love. It won't work. The marriage is the act of beginning to love. And you see that, and that's why there's such thing as an arranged marriage. You see that now. We don't like that today. I get it. But what I'm trying to say in this whole thing is in teaching this course and in offering it, what you start to see is there's a whole other way of thinking that demands a type of immersion. And the immersion is to get out of yourself and to see something different and to see a different way of understanding. And a lot of people don't want to do that. Even in an intellectual setting, they kind of want what they already know to show up on their computer, to show up on their Insta feed or whatever. So we're trying to break them out of it. That feels like what a test pilot's doing. You got to get out of So anyway, I'm going on and on. I do this. I'm that side of the family. You and Elizabeth are like, and now we will calmly approach this most impossible thing and we will conquer it. And I'm like, What? So it is. Hey, Tim, thanks for coming on, man. It wasn't so bad, was it?
Thanks, John. Well, I hope you ended up with some good info here. It was fun.
Oh yeah, no, we did. Your experiences are helpful to people, and they're perfect for this show. It's perfect for this segment, the Immersionship series on WAWTAR. So thanks, man. I'll see you soon, I hope.
Yeah, thanks, John. That'd be great.
I'd love to see you soon. Okay, guys, that was Tim Berg. What's the title? What's your title? You're a Navy pilot, sergeant. What is it? Corporal, commander? What is it? Previously in the Navy.
I was a lieutenant and a lieutenant commander, as rank, but I was a test pilot as a kind of profession or test pilot instructor.
Got that. Okay, good.
And then now I'm still lucky enough to still fly airplanes, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, we're glad you're the one testing these planes that we're all flying in. Thank you, Tim Berg. All right, we'll see you later, and I'll check you soon, and I'm sure I'll see you out west. I'm going to try to come out and do some KPs out there. So,
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, Tim Berg, everybody, take care. Well, that was fun. Yes, that was nepotism. I'm not inviting all the people I'm related to onto the show, but I did invite Tim. Tim, thank you. That's Tim Berg, Lieutenant Commander Tim Berg. This is WAWTAR. This is First Things Foundation, and I have an offering. Become a recurring donor, and you should. This day, you'll get a link very soon to a course. The course is called The History of Love. You just heard me talking about it. The History of Love. It's a philosophical look at how people have known all these forms of love. Hindus, Muslims, Christians. We're going to take a look. And we're going to do it online. It's a really cool little class, a little program I use. And this year, we're going to simulcast it. We're going to simulcast it from KP Restaurant in Greenville. So if you're in town or if you're nearby, become a recurring donor and show up every week, taste a new Georgian wine while we go through the history of love. Have a great day, guys. Peace out. Much love. Keep writing and supporting. Say hi to all of our field workers and make sure you check out their videos. Their videos are monthly vlogs dedicated to their impresarial projects. They're pretty cool. They're way beyond pretty cool. What they are is insight into our work that allows you to relate in real ways to our field workers who are relating in real ways to local folks we call impresarios. Check us out, www.first-things.org.